why we don't have cycling lanes. You could ask him something along those lines. But in this next panel, we're going to talk about green infrastructure. How can we make our infrastructure, our buildings, our homes, our projects resilient to this challenge that is climate change that we all face? Your traditional hut, when you build it with mud and you put grass on the roof, is that a resilient infrastructure? When you slap solar panels on your roof, is that a resilient house? What does it mean to actually be resilient? And so to have this conversation, I'd like to invite my esteemed panelists, starting with the governor of Mandera County, who has honored us with his presence today, His Excellency Mohammed Adan Khalif, the governor of Mandera County. Please come and join me up here. We have Ms. Nasra Nanda, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Green Building Society, as well as the nominated member of the Nairobi County Assembly. Karibuni sana. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Dr. Robert Sangori, who is the lead building climate resilience with the Urban Poor Program in the Ministry of Lands and Public Works. Karibuni sana. Louise was supposed to join us. On your program, you can see Louise, a lawyer and an environmental planning expert, but she's been taken ill and is therefore not able to join us. Karibuni sana. Karibuni sana. So before we start, I'd like us to watch a short video which will explain why the governor has come all the way from Mandera to join us here today. Please direct your attention to the screens.
Seeing a greening program at my age now is a dream come true. Mandera is more beautiful, it's more greener. It's not only a victory for Mandera, it's a victory for the Republic of Kenya, and it's a victory for the East Africa region.
I used to carry boxes of cooking oil and running away from custom officers for 15 years, taking care of my children.
The trees are our life. We have widows, orphans, and the poor who depend on them for their livelihood.
The 100% funding comes from Mandera County government. It's a very expensive program because unlike other parts of the country, in Mandera you don't just plant tree and leave it. You have to nurture it for a minimum period of about 7 years.
The governor has come all this way here. I'd like you to give a clap to Mandera County for winning. Let me finish. Mandera County, because of that video, you see that initiative to plant trees, they won a Green Cities Award at an international forum. How many of you here have been to Mandera County? Wow, very few people. Was it that green as you saw in the video? No, when you were there last. Well, now the governor says it is. So Governor, I'd like to start with you. Tell us a little bit about this award. How did you get there?
Thank you very much. And when you ask question, how many of the audience went to Mandera? I look around, I think there are about 3, including the CS have not gone to Mandera. So first of all, I want to take this opportunity to invite all of you, or to urge all of you, to visit Mandera, because unless or until you visit a place, it's very difficult for you to know what it is. Of course, the perception out there is Mandera is a very insecure place, a very harsh climate, and all manners of negative reports. But as Kenyans, we need to travel within this country so that we know the beautiful country we own. Having said that, we participated in a program called Future Green World Congress, or Future Green World Awards. And there are about 7 categories. And one of the categories we participated in as Mandera County was Future Green, or Living Green for climate change. So we participated in the Living Green for climate change competition with the city of Liverpool in from UK, and Melbourne from Australia. So we participated in that, and we won the competition because of the concept. Now there's a video, if you have played it. We showed how Mandera looked like before this program and the current status of Mandera. So that was the award, and we represented Kenya, and by extension, we represented Africa. Thank you very much.
How many trees did you plant in that program, Governor?
For the last 7 years, we started with a small scale, scale it up in the year 2018, and we doubled it in the year 2022. In that city, we have planted about 250,000 trees.
Oh, wow. Wow. Nasra, what is a green city? This is an area you're very passionate about. But what does it really mean when Mandera says it is greening itself? What does it really mean?
Thank you, Zainab. And congratulations, Excellency. I think it's amazing for Kenya not to be only known by Nairobi or Mombasa. So I'm really proud of that. Firstly, I'd like to start by saying a green city or a sustainable city is a city that brings together communities, businesses, and nature in a way that they coexist and complement each other. What I mean by this is the built environment is an ecosystem of opportunities and challenges. So if we want to create a green city or a sustainable city, what we're saying is this city works for nature and communities so that then businesses can reap the opportunities and government can leverage the investment it needs to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sangori, again, still on the subject of cities, for development oftentimes is looked at in the terms of how many skyscrapers there are in that city, what is the tallest building, what is the material used to build this building. And about a week or two ago, there was a report that says Nairobi and Mombasa have become urban heat islands, that they're now becoming the hottest towns or cities in Kenya. So, looking at Nairobi and Mombasa, would you say that these two cities are in any way close to being resilient?
Thank you, Zainab. And again, congratulations to His Excellency the Governor for that wonderful video that we have just seen, putting Kenya into the map. Of course, feeding into the conversation that we are having. Majority of those who are in this room spend most of their lifetime in a city. And so how we develop sustainable cities, as Nasras just put it, is very critical for our health and for the general good of the environment. But the question you have just put in terms of how Nairobi, Mombasa, and any other city that is in our vicinity would then look like in terms of how the typologies of the housing situations looks like, is an issue that then needs to take care of the various aspects of inclusivity in terms of integrating what sustainability principles which are underlying from the design stages all the way to we have the construction stage and the post-construction stage. How we live in the house itself, how we live in the buildings that are created, how we live in the homes. And so that aspect of sustainability then needs to bring and infuse what then we have as the green building practices. Now, the green building practices, which of course is a subject of discussion, would then tell us where we are and in terms of the contribution and the performance of these buildings in their state. So that's the point at this stage.
Okay, Dr. Sangori, just a quick follow-up. Yesterday, from the panel, the discussions we had yesterday, one of the things we had was that Kenya is not short of policies. We have so many policies. The problem is implementation. So when you look at the green building codes, the building codes in the country, there are rules and regulations on which you're supposed to follow to ensure that building has enough sunlight, no building is obstructing another, but we don't follow this, and we don't implement to see that this building Zainab is putting up is actually as sustainable as possible, or it has enough sunlight. What are the challenges you're facing as a ministry to ensure that these rules are followed?
Thank you. This is a combination of several factors. One of the issues you will interact with is the aspect of the mindset, which of course was spoken to earlier in this room. Some of the technologies that are being used in the construction stage, you find, depending on where you fall, the aspect that some people feel the issue of cost is still a hindrance to the full integration of the sustainable building practices or the green building practices that then would feed well into this conversation. But at the same time, the aspect of enforcement, as has been said, is a collective responsibility for all of us. It is not just the authorities, but what about the people themselves? We have right away from the developers, the enforcement authorities, and that integration is very critical, so that the blame game that can come, we put it aside and see how we progressively move to the level with which what has been there in the policies you have talked about. The policies have brought, like the recently launched building code, which has very good aspect of how the green building practices can be integrated. What then you need is how we move to implementation. At the same time, even the housing policy has a whole set of elements of green building practices which have already been in the policy frameworks. What then is, are people aware of them? So sensitization is also critical to the masses so that they know how this aspect are already enabled. One critical thing I wanted to mention is, in the past, you will realize that based on what I've just talked about, the mindset and about the issue of whether people are aware is a critical issue. So sensitization then becomes critical across board from all levels, developers, professionals, and the policymakers.
Okay, so just to ask in the room, he's just talked about green building codes. Does anyone know that this exists? Just show of hands. Here in Kenya, you know it exists. So you see you have a lot of work to do to get them to know about this code. But coming back to you, Governor, degradation is a big problem that arid lands such as Mandera County faces. Degradation and erosion, a big problem that you face. And one of the key drivers of this is seen as pastoralism itself, the overstocking and things like that. So when implementing this project to get the people to plant the trees to rehabilitate the land, did you face any challenges with that?
Zainab, I think you said it very well, that because of our nature of our lifestyle and the pastoralism and cycling droughts that have been there because of the climate change, yes, at the beginning of the program, people were not even believing that what we are doing will happen, because we can't. I said in my clip that in Mandera, it's not about planting a tree. You have to plant it and then nurture it for a minimum of 7 years. So they are just saying no, just like any other programs that Kupanda Miti, has been there for many years, even during the late President Moi. So they're saying this is just won't work. So what we did was just to did a serious campaign, and because we have really also appreciate the issues of climate change. You know, if the issues of climate change, Mandera is one of the counties that really was affected. When it rains, it's floods that sweep everything to Dawa River. Even if it doesn't rain in Mandera and rains in Ethiopian Islands, it affects us. And then the drought is what we have witnessed in the year 2021, 22, 23 was actually is one of the worst droughts we have ever witnessed in this country. So at the beginning, there was a bit of resistance. What we did was we did an awareness, a serious campaign, and we involved the communities and make the program that is a community-driven process. And we bring in the issue of families adapting trees, because you don't just plant along the streets. We planted and then zone along the streets and give it to mothers. We targeted the mothers because we find that one, they are the main breadwinners of the families in Mandera. Two, they are always there, and I can say, I don't say men are not responsible, but they are more responsible. So what we did is we zone an area, give it to a certain family. So that's those number of trees, whether they are 30, 40, are given to one family. And then the family, they are paid a stipend of about 10,000 Kenya shillings per month. Not so that this family says from this tree number X to Z belongs to this family. So they take care of that. They plant, they protect, they water, they make sure that the tree grows. So how we want is, one, by doing a serious community mobilization and education, and two, we involve them in even planting. It was not just, we didn't hire people to plant. We encourage the mothers themselves to plant, they protect, preserve, and then they water. So it become a community-driven process. And once the first phase succeeded, then it's like everybody in Mandera, why can't I not plant trees? So people even started competing, planting trees in their own plots and taking care of them. So I think with a bit of community mobilization, involving them, educating them the importance of the trees, and giving them incentives, and putting the right policies, as the engineer said, in place, then it will work. But of course, at the beginning, they said, this thing will not work. Why? Because of the climate condition, the scarcity of water, and so many other factors.
So there were specific kinds of trees you planted, or just any? Specific kinds of trees you planted, or just any?
No, we looked for the drought-tolerant trees. Of course, you can't just plant any species, and there are those there which have already been used by communities in Mandera. So we worked with the Kenya Forestry Service office for advice, technical advice, and NEMA team also were there, and our department. They did a bit of research and then said, with this number of these types of trees, of course there will be challenges of curing and taking care of them, but they are more of drought tolerant than others. So we did a bit of research.
Okay. Nasra, we are starting to see more and more people try to live off-grid because of the challenges with Kenya Power, but we're starting to see more and more people try to live off-grid. But does putting a solar panel on your roof qualify that home as a green home?
So I think what's important to realize is it is a component of greening your home. So, for example, if you were to go on a journey with the intention to be certified, then there are certain requirements you need to fulfill. But generally, going back to the drawing board, what is a green building? A green building is a building that is energy efficient, water efficient, material efficient. So using solar means you've hit one requirement, which is the energy efficient component. But you would still have the material component to look at and the water efficiency to look at. So incorporating solar in your building means that you're now starting your journey to be green, but you've essentially ticked off energy efficiency. Yes.
Would it be possible to adopt some components of the traditional home, the traditional house, into greening your home?
Yes, and in fact, the traditional homes actually are using low carbon materials like rammed earth. That's a low carbon material. Sustainability does not have to take the model of the global north, and I think that's the misconception a lot of the times. The global south and Africa was well ahead in utilizing locally available materials. What we forgot as we modernized, I don't know, or regressed, is that we felt what we have is less than. So we need to recalibrate to understand by working with what you have and tweaking it here and there, you are actually working with what's locally available, reimagining what our culture in the context of sustainability looks like, but still winning the sustainability conversation. Yeah.
Okay, so we go back to our roots.
Yes.
Okay. However, a lot more, there are fewer and fewer of these traditional houses these days. Like if you go to my village, you'll not find mud-walled and grass-thatched huts anymore, even though they used to exist, a lot of them, a couple of years back. But maybe, like you said, we need to go back to our roots. But Dr. Sangori, coming back to you, the construction sector is seeing a boom in Kenya. But we also have global commitments, climate targets that we are signatories to, we participate to. Yourself, you participate actively in the COP process. So we have commitments that we have made that we need to attain certain climate goals by a certain time. But then we have this growing construction industry that seems to be growing uncontrollably. How do we balance this economic growth versus the climate commitments we made?
Thank you. In terms of the climate commitments, now, the climate commitments, we also look at them in terms of other international obligations. Now, one of the key international obligations is the SDG. So in the city, for example, we are focusing on SDG 11, on sustainable cities and communities. But at the same time, we have other commitments, like the New Urban Agenda, which is agenda setting for the 20-year cycle. Right now, we are talking about the New Urban Agenda, which is Habitat 3, running from 2016 all the way to 2036, just to mention a few. But then combining this with now the aspect of the Paris Agreement, which is, of course, is what is guiding the global conversation on climate change at the moment. But this, put into that, and the principle of leave no one behind is also there. Leave no one behind, leave no space behind. And so looking at all this, the balance has to be there. But Zainab, you will recall that we are in the African context. And what are we saying in terms of the obligation which is there? That in terms of the greenhouse gas emission, we are at less than 4% in terms of our contribution. And so, but where is our development pathway? So this is the balance that we are saying. We are not stopping our development process as we move towards sustainability, but a little bit of seeing how we integrate the sustainable principles into it. And this is what Nasra just talked about in terms of the integration of the renewable energy technologies, the integration of the overall green building practices into the development process, starting from passive building designs. One element that besides the energy, the water, the material resource efficiency, there's also the aspect of how do we promote the passive building design in a way that we are having more natural lighting also into the buildings that we are doing. And so all this put together is helping us in the balance of the development trajectory that we are moving with.
I feel like Nasra wants to say something there, but before that, just a quick follow-up. When Waziri Chirchir was in energy, he used to talk a lot about converting the diesel engines into hydrogen-powered engines so that you don't have to throw away the entire vehicle in the process of meeting our climate targets. How would that work for a building to convert it into a sustainable building? Is it possible, or would you need to tear it down completely and start over?
In terms of buildings, and this also goes back to to what I draw again from what NASA mentioned, that there are some practices that we were having which are not necessarily bad, but need to be integrated as we move to modernizing them, but also not discarding them at all. Now, in some traditional setup of construction, the materials reuse is one fundamental thing that is still there, and it can still be used. In some cities, which may not necessarily be in Africa or in Kenya, but are good practices, which we are also talking about how to move towards that direction. You find a municipality, like the governor is now here, you create a material recovery center within the municipality or within the county, where all the demolished materials would then find a way where they are collected, but then people in that setup come and pick them. And so you, instead of finding where to throw them away, they are still a resource for reuse. And all these are still part of the sustainability principles that we are saying of how those can be integrated in our practices.
Okay. Governor, I'd like to bring you in that point. What would a resilient infrastructure system look like for you in your context as Mandera County? Because you're not an area that is highly developed like Mombasa or like Nairobi. Therefore, the situation might be a little bit different for you. But what would need to happen for you to say Mandera town as a town is a fully resilient town?
Thank you. When the area we are talking about here, we call it a green city, is actually the area I planned when I was the mayor for Mandera just before devolution. Because in our setup in northern Kenya, as we came and settled in town, it's not in a planned way. Normally when drought strike and then we have the pastoralists drop out, then people move to the nearest town and just settle somewhere just to get assistance from the relative. So in Mandera, we have the old town, the area they call it Bulaimpia, a section they call it Bunangufu, meaning they settle it by force, maybe that's what it means by then. So what I did that time was when we planned for the new area out of the old Mandera town, where now we have our county headquarters, we did it in a modern way. We bring in the planners, surveyors, we surveyed, beacon the area, and we designated some areas for as a green area, and we had enough road reserves. That's why we are able to plant trees along the reserves. And for me, what I can call a green city is a city, when the place we went, the Utrecht city, the level of advance, the way they have advanced so far is now, they're even demolishing some sections of tarmac road and then turn it to green. We are yet to reach there because we have very few kilometers of tarmac even to convert in the first place. So after we surveyed and allocated the plots, we deliberately did concrete pillars so to avoid encroachment so that we have enough area for greening. Apart from the roads, I think it's important also to involve the communities to plant trees. And what we are really, the most important thing we are realizing now that the new developers, people who are now developing, especially in the surveyed areas, first thing they do even before starting construction, they plant trees so that by the time they complete the house, then the plot is even greener. So, of course, the element of solar energy is very important. In our case, we have about 1,200 solar in that area now. And most of the people, of course, one of the reasons is because of the reliability of power in that area. They have went back to solarization of their plots. So for me, is of course, cities are at different stages. All of them cannot be, the methodology cannot be the same. Of course, there is the element of the climate, conditions of a particular area. So the most important thing is policies first, so that when we are developing and planning new area, then we bring in now the issue of green city, because it never used to be there. People started talking about climate change just recently. So when some of these centers were started, nobody even talks about climate change. So I think the most important thing is the collaboration between the national and the county government. We applied the bottom up and top down method, and then educate, and most important, involve the communities.
Okay, interesting. If you listen to what Monica said, she said sustainability is something that is very close to Nation Media's heart. And I'd like to also say that the Nation Center itself is in the process of converting. It's a process we should complete in the next couple of years. So maybe we'll become the first media house in the region to be working in a green building. So hopefully we'll complete that in the next couple of years. But Nasra, bringing you in here. A technology transfer is a subject that is, I might call it touchy, even in the COP process. Technology transfer, Africa wanting technologies brought down or scaled down to African communities so that they too can be on track to the climate targets that the world has. What are some of the emerging technologies you're seeing in greening infrastructure and greening buildings that Kenya could learn from?
Thank you for your question. I think, number one, as the Global South, if we say Africa is taking charge of its narrative, then we need to take charge of our narrative. We cannot be beggars and choosers. So we need to come out of that mindset that we want to have our voice, but at the same time, we want to beg. We have to pick a struggle. Are we beggars or are we leading our narrative? I prefer leading our narrative because it puts us at the driver's seat. What does this look like in the context of the built environment and technology transfer? One, it's what I talked about initially, using our own cultural practices and locally available materials to build. So we have local companies that are working with locally available rammed earth, and they're actually finding that a lot of players in the informal settlements are actually keen to work with them to see how they can build, because the feel of it is like cement. So if you look at local solutions, there's less dependency. So that's one approach. The second thing is, if we also have a plan for ourselves. What is our plan as Africans when it comes to our cities, when it comes to housing, when it comes to resilience? Do we have one? If we don't, there's always going to be someone dictating your plan. So as Africans, we need to be very clear. Why is climate change important for us? In my view, the climate conversation is very much a development conversation. Because when you develop cities, you need to make them resilient, you need to make them sustainable, they need to be working for people. So it's a priority for us as Africa to develop in a way that works with nature and our people. So in that regard then, what that means is as we build, we need to build in adapting to local climate. So what we've done as the KGBS is we've recognized IFC has their green rating tool, we've recognized the US Green Building Council has its rating tool, but we're now working with the Architectural Association of Kenya to come up with the Safari Green Building Index, which is going to be a localized Kenyan-based green rating tool. What that means is the standards will be localized, so the pricing will be localized. And also the expertise required will be localized. So if we start taking charge of that, then the costs will be lower, sustainability is not exclusive, inclusive, and also our solutions reflect our market. Thank you.
Nasra, you're also a nominated member of the County Assembly of Nairobi, and Nairobi is notorious for having buildings that seem to be following no codes, popping up everywhere, no lighting. You walk into a building, you can't tell whether it's day or night. What are the challenges the Assembly is having in ensuring that these buildings have or are following the right construction codes?
Thank you. So it's a multi-layered issue. So number one, you have rogue developers who are trying to make a quick buck. So what they'll find is shortcuts equals faster recovery of their money into their investment. So here, the challenge is, how do we make doing the right thing the smart thing? It means we need to have incentives for developers who are going the full mile, which so far have not been materialized. And that's a challenge, because if I know Zainab is taking shortcuts and her project is finished and I'm doing the right thing, but mine is still, taking long, then there's higher chances of me in my next project going your way rather than the right way. So that's a huge problem. The second is also capacity. on-ground capacity. Once the building approvals have been confirmed, there's no checking to verify whether what was approved is what was on site. So what you find is a lot of the times the approvals are for buildings which are maybe 6 floors or 8 floors, but then when you go to check, which recently happened actually, is whatever was approved for 8 floors was a 20 floor building. And you only find out if you go to verify, which is now the second challenge. And I think the third is we have a lot of laws, but are they helping or complicating the situation? I think they're complicating the situation. I think we need to start thinking about making businesses thrive with our legal framework rather than making things harder. So I think those are the 3 key challenges. And of course, the political realm also doesn't help. Thank you.
Lack of political will. Robert, in the earlier panel, the one with the young people, something came up, the disconnect in education. We are talking about climate targets, we are talking about climate ambitions, but we are not infusing this in our education system. We are not infusing this in training. In university, the students who are learning to be engineers are not being taught about green buildings, are not being taught about how to convert a building. Is this something you are addressing as a ministry?
Yes, allow me to, before I come to this question, just to add one point to the earlier question on the technology transfer and the international conversation, the COP process. When the CS was talking earlier in his keynote address, he gave vivid example of the challenges that as a country we are facing. When the rail transport system is affected by these sudden changes due to climate change, how are we addressing it? And so you find that one of the key issue in the negotiation is around the means of implementation, which borders around finance, capacity, and the technology transfer. And so in this conversation, the element that would then be critical is to see how the processes of influencing the technology transfer into aspect that can help the authorities to stabilize the processes then becomes a critical issue. But not picking that technology as it is, but localizing that technology in the local context to the prevailing conditions and circumstances. And so back to the issue of the sustainability and education. One of the things that I want to say, which I've interacted with, is when it comes to green building practices. I remember at some point we worked with other organizations like UN Habitat, where we were looking at how to come up with the green building practices, principles, but how to come up with manuals that then can be disseminated. And one of the issues which we worked jointly was to look at how the curriculum of the universities, for example, can start to integrate this aspect of green building practices. Of course, they have been there, but there are improvements which then need to be integrated, but then upscaled at the same time. So for instance, I know the School of Architect of the University of Nairobi was one of the areas where these practices were done. And this was a program for the East African region, which was trying to look at the curriculum of all the universities in the region to see the architect, learning institution to integrate some of this component. So these are the bits that then can be taken forward as we move and as we fully now mainstream the aspect of integrating the green building practices into the design and construction.
Thank you. I'd like to take advantage of the presence of CS Chirchir here and ask questions. So Waziri Jitayarishe. So if you have a burning question you'd like to ask the CS, I know he'll be leaving shortly. He's got somewhere else to be. A hand has already gone. Oh my God. Waziri, you're very popular. Maybe you'd like to choose who asks you the question. He'll take 4 questions. Okay. Would you like to choose which 4 questions you'll take? Since there are many hands. Okay. Winnie will...
All right, we're gonna balance gender. 2 gents and 2 ladies. And since you're here, and please keep your question short and precise, okay? Straight to the point. State your name and your question very shortly, okay? All right, so let me start with you. A lady, and then a gent and a lady. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody here. The CS. My name is Eric Ambuche from Embakasi South, and I'm an environment enthusiast. And first, I have to thank NMG for this function, and seeing the CS, though I was not here in the morning, but I heard there was a CS Miano, and right now we have CS Chericher Transport. This shows how they value your cause. Mine, without much ado, let me just use this platform. My question was to be read yesterday, but because the CS is here, I'll just congratulate him for coming here. Then I did share what happened yesterday on my status, and the people of Embakasi told me that send this message to those attending, that, or the panelists, that there are words, there are terms that they are using, and it is making them think like environment and climate action or change are 2 different things. Let me use this platform kindly to, or let me then sit, then let me do, before I sit, Bwana CS, watu wa Butere wamenituma tafadhali, kuna barabara inatoka Lunza to Ikolomani, tafadhali haipitiki, na kuomba, natumia fursa hii kuomba Bwana CS, barua ndio hii.
Umeleta barua, thank you very much. Did you even ask the question kweli? Hakuna question hapo. Okay, sawa. A lady. I'm looking for a lady. Okay, sawa. Very briefly, okay? Usitume salamu. We're out of time and Bwana CS has to go somewhere, right? So your name and your question.
Okay, good evening. My name is Akira Jefkemai, Mr. and Miss Climate Kenya. A quick question to the CS. I'm sorry. I want to use the opportunity because you have them as the government. You have Madam Nasra. You've talked about local innovations, and that is great. I'm just thinking, since Waziri was just recently in energy, and my passion is there a bit, could we have a system of integrating solar energy into the grid so that we can enable our people who have solar to do that? Because right now, we are working towards last mile connectivity, but still we have a lot of challenges. We have to appreciate that we can use solar because this is the heart of the tropic area. So we are in the equator and we have a lot of solar. We can have our people even earning from it, and we can innovate around it. I have a very ambitious friend who told me he's going to create diesel from maize stalks, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. So let's encourage those kind of innovations to come through. And Bwana Waziri, I would like you to help me with that. Thank you.
You don't even have questions. Bwana CS, I want to say, you seriously have a question? Okay, straight to the point, all right?
My name is Nevi. A question to the CS. Given the urgent need to combat climate change and reduce carbon emissions, what steps is your ministry considering to increase taxes on diesel and petroleum vehicles while reducing taxes on electric vehicles to motivate greener transportation options and support Kenya environmental sustainability goals? Yes.
Simple instructions. Question is straight to the point. Okay, I'm just gonna come to you again. You have a question or a comment? Okay.
Yes, the government protocols represented here. And everybody here who is a leader, a representative of Kenyan government, and everybody else here. I'm honored to be here. Have been sent by my senior Hassan Lakija from Hassan Lakija and Company Law Advocates. Yeah. So my name is Nehama Rotich, LLB. I am a lawyer. And one of my questions that I would like to address is first on what was addressed by Daily Nation Media, 13 September, page number 10, which was calling for memoranda on additional budgetary allocation on matters of climate change. And one of my questions calls to the cabinet secretary together with other parties of the government that if there are specific approaches in which these additional budgetary allocation will be to. Because one of the things that I have seen is when we say that the problem is climate finance, then the question is, where do we apply the finances? How do we apply the finances? Are there specific procedures that are being followed? And the National Drought Authority on 23 ASL counties, one of the TAPL report 2024 and 2023 says that over 1 million people are still suffering because of the drought in the 23 counties. And the same has not been addressed from 2023 until now. So are there priorities and are there ways in which specifically the same can be addressed? Thank you so much.
So that was a question for the CS and also to the other panelists, right? Okay, but the CS, do you want to answer the first two? Because there are only two questions. Then I'll cross over to the other side. Okay.
Can I add you a third one, Waziri? Maybe you could also tell us when you should start riding our bicycles on the streets, because the roads are not non-motorized transport friendly.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you for the questions, and I think I would have taken the cue from Eric Ambunje and be that optimistic, because at least he's given a piece of small memoranda, and I'll be looking at that. One of my assistants is already looking at that road. The question from Kauai on integrating solar to the grid to basically accelerate the green energy mix from solar so that we can achieve our target of more renewable on the grid, and possibly have that achieve the 2030 vision or target shortly. Kauai, who was Kauai? Yeah, there you are. There are regulations under the 2019 Energy Act. There were several regulations that would be published by the EPRA, Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, to support some of the targeted areas that will accelerate the renewable energy generation. And one of them is the net metering. I'm sure you understand the net metering is where when you install a solar panel or you do wind generation or you do hydro, if you can do hydro within your own facility, you can use so much of that energy that is required to run your home state or your small industry, and the balance energy to make your project bankable, because power generation is expensive, and that's why we do a lot of PPP. The extra energy that you generate, you can feed to the grid. It's like you are selling it to the grid. And at night when the solar is not running, you can then draw back the power from the grid. So the regulations for net metering, I think, are basically in place as we speak today. I don't know whether they have been gazetted, but that is something that will be actualized shortly. And that is going to allow power generators up to, I think, 1,000 kilowatts, one megawatt, to be able to feed into the grid under a net metering framework, and therefore draw power back from the grid under arrangements through EPRA and with the off-taker Kenya Power and Lighting Company. So that is a reality today, and we should be able to get all our roofs having solar in a more economical way, so that when you're not using, you're selling it to the grid, and when you need power, you can then tap in and use that power. Navy, yes, thank you for the question on carbon emission and tax on diesel to accelerate e-mobility. You will note that as we move to e-mobility as a country, we'll possibly have to put more taxes on e-energy because it is so cheap. Today, when we generate power on solar, wind, and geothermal, we feed into the grid at 7 cents US. 7 cents US, if you convert at 130, is about 10 shillings, 10, 11 shillings. When we generate power on diesel for picking, we generate at 25 cents US. At 130 to the dollar, 25 cents will give you, what is that figure, Mike? About 30 shillings. So you are comparing power generation to run your car using diesel at 30 shillings compared to running your car using solar, wind, or geothermal energy at 10 shillings. In fact, we are asking ourselves in the policy coming out how we do the road maintenance levy tax so that we can take it to 12, 13, 14 shillings. It will still be cheaper by 50%. And certainly, the policy that will be coming out in due course will be taken through public participation as it goes through Parliament. We'll have opportunity to inform how we can improve that policy and so that we can quickly accelerate the e-mobility space and ensure that we reduce the use of fossil fuels. Nehemiah Rotich? Nehemiah Rotich. You don't sound like you come from my community. I love to work very hard to catch up. We're doing so much, Nehemiah Rotich, on the space of putting in more budgetary allocation to support greening our environment. Let me congratulate Governor Adan Khalif from Mandela for the great work you are doing. You saw what, if we can document, maybe Zainab, we are not documenting and we are not talking much more about what we are doing. Mandela planted some 250,000 trees and documented and took it to this Living Green Green Cities Award, and we won an award as Mandela. I don't know whether they understood that Mandela is even in Kenya. That was great. Congratulations. When I did indicate that in my own ministry, I have a target to plant 3.7 million trees a year. You know, the great work that won us an award is 250,000 trees in 7 years. If we all plant a tree and work on the kind of targets, I did indicate I have a target of 3.7 million trees, and every year, and I report to cabinet every month or whenever there is cabinet meeting. And equally in energy, I think I had another crazy number of 5.3 million. And we were kind of achieving, working very hard. At about 50 shillings per tree to plant or to grow the tree, because we saw what the governor was doing. He is paying the ladies to water the trees. We saw the trees being tendered for 4, 5, 6 years. Even if you costed that tree to maintain at 100 shillings, for 3.7 million trees or for 15 billion trees we are planting as a country, that will be a budget of 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings in the 10 years. And we are making budgetary provision as ministries in areas we can save in social programs that we run to ensure that we achieve those targets. So when I work with my Kura, with my Kera, when we do the Kenya National Road networks, we are now including tree planting programs along the corridors. And we need to report on those, not just for the sake of documenting on paper. We need to ensure the survival rate of the trees is good enough so that we can achieve our target. So there is, without saying or seeing a line budget on sustainability, tree planting, or all the things that we need to do in greening our homes, in the building materials, sustainable building materials, in the way we manage our water ecosystem. I want to assure you, my dear sister Rotich, that there is so much budgetary allocation. In fact, Governor, what that translates for me every month is planting 600,000. I did some computation here. Planting some 600,000 trees every year. If we are committed to achieving the kind of targets that we are talking about, and not just planting, but maintaining those trees like we saw in Governor's clip that won Kenya an award, we can really green this environment together. And so there's going to be some serious budgetary allocation. You may not see in the line budgets directly, but for us to be able to grow those 15 billion trees in 10 years, it is really a tall order, and we all need to work together. In fact, I was telling my assistant that I learned so much in terms of, I did indicate that we are working with CBOs, communities who live around the forest, and so on and so forth, because you cannot sustain as a ministry going out to plant trees. We need to build partnerships with the people who live around those ecosystems to be able to achieve those targets. Going forward, Zainab, I think that's a challenge that we need to do. Cycling, that's what I call in my talk non-motorized kind of channels to be friendly to pedestrians walking to work. It's more healthy. For cyclists, when I came from China, the lane for the cyclist was in many places wider than the road. And then you can imagine what we can achieve by ensuring that we all came here cycling because there is a lane for cycling. In fact, in some sections there are traffic lights for cyclists because, and then yes, it cuts so much on the energy because China has been very strong on fossil fuels, and you can imagine if you are moving people to work, into work, out of work, to their daily activities on cycling and so on and so forth, or even walking for that matter. So yes, that's a big challenge. We'll incorporate that and ensure that as we have our streets more pedestrian friendly, we're going to also seriously consider and build lanes for cyclists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There was one last question for Nasra, and then I can release my panel. I think there's a question for you. It was a comment. Oh, it was a comment. Well, then I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to participate in this panel. Waziri, thank you for sitting through it, all of it. We had wanted some children here from St. Mary's School who had wanted to entertain you. I can say maybe they're preparing themselves out there. Maybe somebody will get them. They just have a 1-minute skit that we'd like for you to see before you leave. Thank